injuries to the body. And the two main areas where someone got injured would be the military or the gladiators.
Yeah.
So for
they
someone,
did look after the gladiators.
yeah, someone who aspired to be a surgeon, and it was a very obscure and not very popular branch of Roman medicine, what they would actually do is to get themselves attached to the legions or to the ludi, the gladiatorial schools, and they would learn a lot. So if you look at most of the instruments here, certainly all these ones over here, they're primarily orthopedic related instruments. So for lifting broken bones, for lifting tendons or veins out of the road of a bone while you're setting or fixing an injury, bone chisels, and then over here we've got a lot of probes, because if you've got an injury where the soldier's been out on patrol, he's been attacked, he's sustained a serious puncture wound, perhaps an arrow through into him, or he's been stabbed, it's taken a few days for his comrades to get him back to the hospital, then his wound's going to be a little bit manky. So what I'd need to do is then to explore the wound to see how far the infection goes in, and to do that,
would they give the soldiers something to ease the pain?
The poppy.
Yeah.
And so what you would do is crush the seeds down, boil them up with Celsus describes a potion where you boil the seeds in wine and raisins, and then that would actually reduce down, which you could then drink as a draught, or you could reduce it down further, mix it with flour, and then let it set, and then cut it in small pieces. Et presto, you've got pain relieving tablets. And they would have actually had that sort of thing. The difference is that if you were to be, Johnny Public, and you were coming along and you wanted treatment, then you'd have to be quite wealthy, because it doesn't come cheap. So this is why for a soldier, actually they have free access to that. So a soldier's life is not actually such an unhappy one, because you'd have a regular supply of food, you'd have a regular supply, you'd have a regular home, a roof over your head for 25 years, whereas many people would never get that. Just ordinary citizens of Rome, even a citizen, which is quite a privileged position to be in, would not have long-term access to all the benefits, and you get medical support for those 25 years. In some respects, a gladiator would often have a better quality of life than an ordinary member of the public who was perhaps watching him fight in the arena, which sounds rather bizarre.
Well, they were totally pampered. They had the best.
If they were good, yes.
If they were good, they'd have the best food. They were pampered, oiled, and what have you.
They may only fight about 5 times a year, and often the most successful gladiators, it would be very unlikely that they would ever be put in the arena to fight to the death.
They wouldn't fight to the death
because it would cost too much. If the sponsor of the games was prepared to pay a large sum of money to ensure that there was blood spilled and that there was some missio match where there was going to be a death at the end of it, then yes. But that was something the gladiator accepted as part of his fate. Sometimes, not all the time. But it was something that the life of a soldier, the life of a gladiator could often be actually a little bit more comfortable than just somebody sitting on the street. The average room for a citizen of Rome would have been not much bigger than this area here, and that's where you would live. And you'd have your bed, you'd have a chair. This idea of these great big palaces, yes, for the very, very wealthy, but for your ordinary people, sort of a 2 up, 2 down terrace house would seem quite a luxurious thing. But that's true of society really up until probably the latter part of the 19th century, early into the 20th century.
My eyes have been drawn to this thing. What's
this?
Because that really does not look very nice.
Yes?
I wouldn't have a clue.
Well, this is called a strigil, and it's how you kept clean. Because
no, I've seen that God knows how many times in the film Gladiator, on the bloody series Rome, and I did, because it was with all these medical things.
When you have, well, normally my full display is 2 tables, because what I'll take you through is the cult religions of healing, the medicine and the hygiene and the standard of living that they had. But yes, if you keep yourself clean,
because a body slave would have used that.
That's right. What you would do is
he'd be oiled down,
and
he'd be stood there like this, and you'd have the body slave scrape it all off.
And then what you'd do is you'd go and you would go through the whole series of baths. If you ever go up to, are you locals?
Yeah.
If you ever get yourself up to Carleon, just outside Newport, it's well worth it. I mean, you're only down the road.
Been to Bath.
Yeah.
Been to the Roman baths.
Bath is a different one, but in Carleon they actually have the legionary baths there.
Oh,
and it wasn't. You've seen the movies. Someone just sort of goes into a small sort of walk-in bath, and you think that's how they bathed, just the same as we would do in a bath. I mean, there's a little bit more luxurious. That wasn't how they did it. You would go along. Going to the baths was a big occasion, and you'd probably carry out a little bit of business while you were there, and you'd go in. You'd start off in the entrance where you'd probably do some exercise. Then you might have a gym hall where you carry out some weight exercise. You might have your equivalent of a personal trainer who would do some wrestling with you or some combat, get you doing some weightlifting. Then you go for the whole process of cleaning, and you'd start off by going into what we essentially call a sauna nowadays, and it would be so hot that you would be sweating buckets. And then by doing that, you're sweating out all the dirt and the grime inside you. So then you'd go through and you'd be oiled up. If you had your own personal body slave, as you say, you'd take him with you. Otherwise, what you would do is you would stand there, and one of the bath slaves would oil you over, and then you'd stand there with sweating this all into the oil. And then with the strigil, they would just scrape the oil off, and they just do you all over, hence the curve, because it fits around all the nooks and crannies. And then you'd go into some of the water baths, and at the end of it you come out really quite clean. And then you probably have a cold?
Would the last one then be the cold?
Yeah, you go into a tepidarium, which is a warm one, and then you just clean off all the oil, and then you go into a plunge pool of really ice cold. But people still do that.
It closes the pores back up.
Yep. Probably get a shave at the same time. Get your hair curled. Well, yep. I don't have one. I've started working on one, but there are examples of Roman razors.
That might have been a little hair pluck.
You're not far off. I've got 3 here. Everybody would have one of these, and that's for cleaning your teeth. Or for cleaning your nails. That's for your ears. And then this is for not so much plucking your hair, but for removing splinters. Because you'd all carry one of those. Nowadays you get a splinter, you can just get it out, perhaps put a bit of Savlon on it. Didn't have that. So what you would need to do is actually make sure you can get that splinter out pretty quick, because if you don't, it's going to get infected, and without antibiotics, it'll fester, and before you know it, you'll have a localized infection which gets spread, and ultimately you become systemic, and you might end up having to lose your thumb or your hand
if you got that bad.
And so good hygiene is really quite important, and as I say, everybody would keep these. Now, these became very popular. You've got the most crude one there, and that's something that perhaps the lowest of the order of society might be able to afford, because even that's relatively expensive. Then you would have someone a little bit better off might be able to afford a simpler one like this, and that's but it's got a couple of little crude decorations in it, which shows someone's tried to improve it. And then you're moving up. This one's some quite well off
Yeah.
would have had something like that. And ultimately, I haven't got one here, but you could find them, the most high status of individuals would actually have these sorts of things with not necessarily jewels inset into them, but they would have inlay of coloured paints or coloured pastes inlaid into them. And these two and some of the others I've got at home are based, if you ever go down to the Museum of London, and they've got a massive collection that they found in the rivers and the streams of London, and they found lots of these and they've got them all on display. And this is something that everybody would have had. This is one of the most essential things. And like I say, that normally the full display would show that you don't just rely on medicine as we think of now, because you couldn't afford it. So you had to look after yourself. And that was something that, people, it was very important to do that. It's something that we take for granted these days. But if you think about what life would really been like for so many people, either you didn't want to go along to a doctor, you could be frightened of going to the doctor, or you didn't believe it, or more importantly for all of you,
I didn't touch it. I don't know where it came from.
For the majority of you, being all women, then I'm afraid you're not important enough to make the decision for yourself whether to go to the doctor. So you would rely on the head of the household, which was called the paterfamilialis, and he would decide whether or not, if your paterfamilialis, which was usually your father, but not always, it could be an uncle, it could be a grandfather, if he decided that medicine was not something that he believed in, then you didn't go to see a doctor. If he turned around to you and said, right, you need to go along to the local altar and give an offering, then that was what you did. And you relied, Roman life was very much driven around the dominant figure of the family. And
most times.
It's life. Nowadays, of course, it's completely the opposite, isn't it? And women rule the roost. Yeah? No one's going to disagree, are they? The thing is, all the women know it and all the men just suffer it. But I speak to a man who's been married for 30 years. So it's one of those things where people, when you're looking at Roman life, don't just look at the objects. Don't just look at how people appear. Think about what that means. If I show you something, let me just squeeze that. This to me sums up the Roman approach to life. That one instrument. Does anybody know what it is? Anybody know what a cataract is? Yeah? Anybody had a cataract? Actually, I was talking yesterday and there was a lady who'd had a cataract operation. She was stood there. Cataract is essentially a crystalline formation that builds up on the lens of the eye. And as I was saying a little bit earlier on to some of the children that were standing around, if your vision deteriorated in Roman, nowadays it's very simple to get a cataract procedure done. It's just a day case procedure. If your vision deteriorates, whether it be you've got an eye infection or you're wearing glasses, then it's very simple to go along to your optician, go along to the chemist, get some topical eye drops. But actually in Roman society, if you started, or in the ancient world, if you started to lose your vision, that was it. Once you were blind, you couldn't fend for yourself, you couldn't provide for yourself. So unless you had a wealthy family that would give you patronage,
shall I come back later? Sorry.
I'll dig it out for you. Oh, 2 seconds, sorry. Somewhere in here. If you had a wealthy family to support you, you were okay, but for the majority of people, that was it. You go blind, before long you'd be starving. The most common problem that affected Romans, even quite young, were cataracts. Nowadays we think of cataracts as something that old people get, or people who live in particularly Africa or the Asia, Indian subcontinent suffer from. But actually it's on the increase in Northern Europe because of the UV problems, and it's particularly common amongst people with blue eyes. So make sure you're always wearing in bright sunlight a proper pair of sunglasses. But cataracts were a big problem in those days. Now there was a Roman author called Celsus who wrote a lot about medicine. He wasn't a doctor himself, but he wrote a lot about it, and he gave this wonderful description of this instrument. And he said that the treatment of cataract required a surgeon of steady hand. It's not too bad. He had to have a well-lit room. This is good enough for me. He needed to have a high-back chair. So we haven't got one of those today. But the back of the chair had to be such that it came above the head of the patient. And then he needed, you're beginning to know where I'm going, aren't you?
Yeah.
He needed 2 able-bodied assistants, one to hold the hands of the patient and the other to stand behind and hold the jaw and head back. And the cataract was removed by inserting that into the pupil of the eye and then just gently moving around to cause the cataract to disintegrate. And it would then just settle underneath in the bottom of the eye, in the aqueous.
So I'm surprised they didn't invent a chair where they could actually strap the
I'm
head
sure
totally still,
I'm sure people
and then
would have
strap
had
the
that
person
as
there.
well. In Switzerland, or modern day Switzerland, Helvetica as it was then, they had a type of couching needle, this is called, that was actually hollowed through the centre, and then there was a fine little needle that went all the way through to the point, which we understand that the assistant, having inserted it in and moved it around, the assistant could move the inner core out, suck, and it wouldn't suck the thing up, but what it would do is it would suck the cataract, the remnant would actually stick to it, and then you could withdraw it, removing the cataract out through the opening. Now, just think, anybody fancy me doing that to them now?
No.
Remember, there's no anaesthesia, so they're all awake while this is being done. And yet this was a very, very common procedure. Celsus describes it being carried
say a
out.
little bit of opium or something.
Wouldn't really be necessary. But that's not the point, it's the fear of it.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, the moment
if
you
I
held
said to
that
you
up, the
now,
idea of that coming towards my
if I said to you now I was going to come towards you with this instrument to take one of your teeth out without an anaesthetic, you would be squeamish. But imagine someone sticking that into you.
Yeah.
And what's that telling you?
So
So that instrument is telling you about the nature of their lives. It's not just a metal probe, but that story behind it tells you just how different they were in their thoughts. Yeah, I'm sure there were lots of people who wouldn't get treated, just as nowadays people get a bit frightened of going to the dentist, so they don't go to the dentist. But actually the majority of us do go and see a dentist, whether we like it or not. I hate them.
Yeah.
You know, I work with dentists all the time. I hate them. Actually, I hate the people I work with as well, but that's a different matter. So you take these out, and this is something that, you know, they would be absolutely scared rigid, but they would do it. Now, if I was going to say to you, look, I need, you know, if you, people still nowadays get cataracts. You know, you're blue-eyed, you're going to get cataract. Live with it. If I tell you the only way we can deal with this is to take your eye out, to stick this into your eye, would you allow me to do it?
I really don't know.
You
The idea of that
you
coming
wouldn't.
towards my eye.
But that's the way that those people thought about life. It is a different way of thinking that you just
Different life,
don't understand nowadays.
Their lifestyle,
Precisely.
they need their eyes. Whereas today,
We take everything for granted in the modern world, and we've lost so much of an understanding of what real hardship is. I know we're all complaining at the moment about the austerity measures and the downturn and everything, and quite rightly so, but compared to how people would have lived their life 2,000 years ago, we are so much better off. It's pretty daunting when you sort of look at what people in those days would have. And that's, as I say, don't just look at the object, but think about the story behind that object. That's far more interesting and anything like that. This one's another great one. Used for taking teeth out. Could also be used for elevating bone. Third use, crushing hemorrhoids. So if you're going to have your tooth removed by the dentist, by the surgeon, just make sure you're going early in the morning. You don't want to be the last patient of the day, particularly if the guy in front of you's just come out to the clinic wobbling a little bit and you're going in saying, can you take my tooth out? So anyway, listen, I'm doing the commentary for the display over there, so I'm going to have to bid you adieu, but do come back afterwards if you want to talk more.
Thank you very